to a classroom, but there's too many of you to be able to go there. The graphic that's down here and that you can find online anywhere is the approaches to learning for the program. And again, I think one of the misconceptions is that IB is all about academics and only academics. And that's actually not true. The balance and the goal is that the student is balanced in all of the different things, in activities, in their community service. So there's different components of the program called the core that are in addition to their to their classes at school. So you have the extended essay. That's a 4,000 word research paper. They get to write that on a topic of their choice. They get to work with a teacher of their choice. And they complete that over a year. Okay, so they have a long time to work on that. There's multiple drafts and processes that go into writing that extended essay. There's also the theory of knowledge. We have class this year it's Mondays. It changes all the time. Last year it was Tuesday. Sometimes it's going to be before school. It's really dependent on our students' schedules and their extracurricular activities. That theory of knowledge class and the other components of the core are what tie everything together. It's what makes IB different than, say, AP, where AP you take an individual class here and there, but nothing really ties them all together. In IB, that theory of knowledge and the CAS and the extended essay bring all of those pieces together. Okay? There's also a learner profile that has 10 different traits. And again, these aren't things that they must be mathematicians and physicists and all of those things. They're things like being risk takers, being balanced. What are some of the other ones off the top of my head? Knowledgeable, caring. I have 2 kids. One is 18 and just started college, and I have a daughter who's in 8th grade. If you put all of those traits in front of me and said, if going through this program will help enhance her or him be a better person and gain more of those traits, I'm all about it. That it doesn't just have to be about just academic coursework, but that they're going to be a more caring and compassionate human being. Let's go, right? We all want our kids to be that. The research indicates that our IB students have better GPAs, they have higher SAT scores, and they do better in college. Not only do they do better in college, but they stay in college. They actually, the graduation rates for our IB full diploma candidates are better than those of their peers who do not complete the full diploma program. And in general, they tend to get out a little bit sooner sometimes too, because they have some credit that they've built up along the way. This quote is from because that makes sense.
At some point, as we all know, we just start pushing buttons until it works. So there it is. Yay!
Good job. Thank you, Dr. Lane. Thank you, Mr. Califano. This quote is one of my favorites from Taylor Pagel. She said, "More than the academic benefits, you're involved in a community filled with beautiful, intelligent, and strong people. When you're surrounded by people who want to make a difference and strive to grow daily, you get the benefit of growing alongside them. You'll see familiar faces in most of your classes, and it's an irreplaceable academic experience." I can't stress enough, and I think the students will speak to this later, the family community that's created within IB. Before this role, I've had this role, this is now my 3rd year as the coordinator. Before that, I taught the IB English course for over 15 years. I've been to weddings, I've been to baby showers, I've been to, unfortunately, a couple funerals, but in all of those, there is always a posse of IB full diploma kids that are hanging around with each other. Just the other day, we've had several actual kids who meet in the program, go off to school in different places, and then come back and get married and have kids. The connections that they make and that they form are really kind of everlasting because they have a really similar experience. And then when they get to college, they find other kids who have also had that similar experience, and the crazy bag of acronyms that they are taking with them, with all the acronyms that IB has to serve. So it's one of those things that I think is intangible, but really significant. A lot of people want to know the differences and similarities between AP and IB. Most people are really familiar with AP. They took AP classes in their own high school time, their other kids have taken it, and maybe now you've moved to a new community. We are the only campus here in Temecula Unified that has an IB program, so people come here often for that. They both are rigorous. They both often gain college credit. It's not a guarantee. The college credit for both AP and IP classes is based upon the performance. Okay, it's not just about taking the class, but how well you do on those exams. They do both have testing exams in May, and they both are weighted in GPA. So instead of, if they earn an A, instead of it being counted as a 4.0, it's being counted as a 5.0. Okay, so if they earn a B, they still get a 4.0 on that rating scale. It's how we end up with some of our crazy GPAs out here, 4.2s and 4.4s and 4.7s. There are some pretty significant differences. As I mentioned, IB is only offered in the junior and senior year. Freshmen can take some AP classes, and we have those offered. Again, the IB is a full program, and I'll show it to you because you didn't get to see it as well as I did. This makes the program an entire complete program because it has all of the things. The outer ring is your actual courses, then you have the core that I was talking about, and then that learner profile there in the center. Okay, so that's what makes it more of a program than an individual course. The IB does address individual aspects like creativity, action, and service. This used to be kind of an overwhelming component. If you know somebody who had a student in IB 10, 20 years ago, their requirement was different. They had an hour requirement, it's no longer an hour requirement. Now it's an objective requirement. And it's really difficult things, like try something new. Stick with it for like a month. Work in a team for a month and see what you can accomplish. It's much more life skills based and looking at helping your student be able to grow. The IB testing is structured very differently. It's much more process oriented, and it's much more oriented on the show me what you know. And I think you guys will be able to help speak to this a little bit later. What the kids really love is that they get to pick the topics that they're learning about. Yes, there's a writing component in every IB class, but the student gets to choose what that is. They get guided and they meet with their teacher and they help refine that process and that topic, but ultimately they're getting to choose what they're learning about. And I think, I can say for myself, I know when I was given opportunity and that freedom and autonomy to choose what I was learning, I had much more success and I had a lot more confidence in what I was doing. Anybody can sit an AP test. I have people all the time come from other schools to take AP tests here in classes that they're not enrolled in at all, but that's not true for IB. When we talk about the differences in exams, this will help explain why that's the case. In AP test, if your student takes as a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, there's two different parts to it generally. There's a multiple choice part and there's some essays. Those all happen on the same day at the same time. Usually about 3 to 3.5 hours, depending on the course. So that one day, that 3.5 hours determines whether or not the student earns college credit. IB exams happen over the course of that class. Sometimes that's a 1-year class, and sometimes it's a 2-year class. So for English, they do a presentation in second semester of their junior year. That presentation is similar to the multiple choice. It's part of whether or not they earn that college credit. Again, they get to pick which books the presentation's on. They get to pick the topic of that presentation. It's actually a one-on-one presentation with their teacher, where it's recorded and sent to the IB, so it's not in front of the whole entire class. And they also get to practice it and rehearse it before they go. Okay, great preparation for college, great preparation for life in general, just the process part. I can tell you, my son is not a natural English learner, and he took the English course. He's now in college and in his communications class, and the first phone call we had last week was, "Mom, do you have any idea how scared these other kids are to speak in front of the class?" And I said, "And you're not?" He goes, "Well, of course I am, but not as much. That kid next to me almost threw up." He was very happy and excited. And I said, "Why? What do you attribute to that?" He goes, "The IO, because I basically have to do an IO this week, but I'm ready and I know how to do it." They also write a process paper. Process just means it takes a long time. They're working on that for about a month. Again, they're choosing the topic themselves, they're working with the teacher, and they're having a chance to revise. And then they do have exams in May, but instead of it happening on one day, it happens over 2 days, and they get about 2 hours for each essay versus AP where they write 3 in about 2 hours. Okay, so some of it is knowing what you like as a student. Sometimes students love the AP framework because they're really good at multiple choice. Oh, it's okay, I can be loud. Okay. They're good at multiple choice, they enjoy multiple choice, and they don't mind writing under time restraints. Other people like me would much prefer to have time to process things and have a longer period of time to work on each of those assessments. So in both, you can see
The AP English, we have a lot of our sophomores take that as a sophomore, and then they take our IB English class. Our IB English pass rate in that class is about a 98% to 100% every year because the AP prepares them so well. The next question that a lot of people want to know is, do universities give IB credit? And I'll let Bryce speak to this a little bit because I think he can speak to it with the UC. Again, a lot of it is dependent on where you are, and a lot of it is dependent on what score you earned on the AP or IB test. Okay, so an IB passing score is a 4 to a 7. Most schools don't give credit for 4s, they give credits for 5s. Some schools even only give credit for 6 and 7. Okay, so it just really depends. The UC system has decided, they changed the way they did it a couple years ago. So if you earn a 30 on the diploma, you have to get 24 to earn your diploma. If you get to 30, the UC says, here's 6 for units, here's elective credit, do with it what you want. We're also going to give you credit for each of your HL scores. So if you did 4 HLs and got those 6 units and you got the 30, you have a potential to earn up to 30 units. And basically, what did Mr. Boyette told me the other day? Andrew walked in and he's a junior because of all of his AP and IB credit. Is it all going to count towards his major? Probably not, but he's going to get to pick his classes sooner, and we all know that that can be one of the hardest things, right? So you're getting that. If you decide not to do the full IB program, and a lot of people choose not to do full IB and just take our course classes, and that's great too, you also can earn college credit for those higher level classes. And again, for the UCs, there are 8 quarter units per exam. Okay, so that's the UC system. You can look up online. I have a couple of links on our IB website that show you for any university. You can type it in. You can see how many IB kids are at that school. It'll tell you a little bit about how much they value the IB diploma. It'll tell you how much credit they give for it, things like that. A lot of people got the next question that they want to know, and this is new. I just pulled this data with the class of 2024. For UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, and UC San Diego, and our campus, our full IB kids were twice as likely to get in. So the UC acceptance rate at Berkeley for our full diploma candidates was above 30%, and our non-full diploma candidates was around 9. Okay, I also compared it to the national averages. So at Berkeley, our diploma rate, acceptance rate for our full diploma candidates was 32%. The national average is 17%. Okay, so almost double in both of those things. So can I guarantee you that your kid's gonna get into UCLA or Berkeley if they do full IB? I cannot. Because they might be looking for a tuba player and your kid might be good in football. I don't know exactly what they're always looking for, but I do know it's gonna prepare them really well for when they get there. And I do know that our students who are full diploma have a better chance of getting in than our students who don't. That much I can prove with our acceptance rates over the past 5 years. I think that's the case because our teachers here are amazing. Our pass rates, 100% pass rates in all of these classes. I think the word on the street, and I'm not afraid to share, is that IB is harder. If it's that hard, why do we have such good success? We have several classes who have 100%, and you can see over here on the right-hand side, up in the 90s and the 80s of kids who are passing these exams, and not passing them just by a little bit, because we're beating the world average in almost everything. The majority of our IB class offerings, we're beating the world average in how they score throughout the world. The numbers on my screen are different than the numbers on your paper. That's because I update them every year and I didn't want to waste paper and just print new. You can see it kind of toggled. So your number on the top is lower, but my number on the bottom is lower. That's because more of our kids decided to go to UCs last year than to go to some of the other schools that are in the middle. But again, you can kind of gauge and see, if you look at UC Santa Barbara, our full diploma kids, this is just the past 5 years, we've had 4 go there. But we've had 15 course kids decide to go there. Okay, so that has a little bit more. But if you look at UCLA, we have 44 full diploma kids there from the past 5 years versus 16 course. So some of it depends where you want to land. If you want to land in Riverside, it's kind of 50-50. the military academy sometimes. Some didn't actually go in. Last year we had a student that's actually going into the military. We've got Vanderbilt. We have somebody graduating from there, I think, this year. And then all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast. I do take appointments, so if your student is here at Great Oak right now, they're more than welcome to come meet with me. Generally speaking, our course selection doesn't start until about January. So around January, we start looking ahead towards next year. I'll visit classrooms, and at that time, they'll be able to set up a meeting with me and come in and sit down and kind of lay out their 3 or 4 year plan, depending on whether or not they're a freshman or a sophomore. If you're an incoming 8th grader, we can meet at the end of this year and talk about next year and talk about what sets them up for success in their freshman year in order to be able to begin the program during their junior year. Bryce, do you want to come down? So I ran into Bryce at graduation, actually, which is always a fun time. I stick around on the field so I can run into people. And he came up to me and he goes, if you ever have an opportunity for me to talk about IB and the benefits, can you please invite me? And I was like, yes, absolutely. So I'm gonna turn it over to him. He can tell you a little bit about his major, his passions, and what he's doing now that he's graduated from both high school and college.
And as of a couple months ago, also a master's. So
Also a master's.
doing a lot more school. But I do have to say, it is definitely good to be back. This is a place I somehow keep finding myself at, no matter how far I think I'm going to go away from the good old Temecula. Something just always brings me right back here, and I think that's a testament to just the strength of the community of this place and what I've really learned through this whole process. I think it's been nothing short of transformational, and I would say I owe a lot of it to the IB program. That's why I'm so passionate about coming back here and doing some of this stuff, because it really is just such an amazing sense of community and just raw intelligence. There really is a strength behind this, how it's transformed basically what I would call the 3 pillars of my life. One of them is during high school, the second one is going into college, and now the workforce and the good old corporate side of things now. So what I've learned is that everything before high school taught us exactly what it means to memorize and to regurgitate. You just store a bunch of knowledge in your head, you dump it onto the next test, you move on to the next thing. It wasn't super helpful for me because I was too good at it. I found that as I was doing these classes, none of it really was a challenge, and I just kept on passing those classes, but not really retaining anything year to year. I merely just kind of finished the classes and moved on to the next thing. Then I got into the IB program, and the very first thing I was told is that I sound like a thesaurus. My writing was horrible. So I went into the first essay probably experiencing the most brutal feedback I've ever received in my life, and that's when I knew I was onto something, that this is gonna be something that really matters for me, something that's really important, and something that's very helpful. And I think it's helped me in just the high school side of things and the community side. As you will all see, I've still talked with all of my IB friends. It's been 6 years. We've gone through college. One of my IB friends was my roommate through all of UCSD experience and still kind of hangs out with me to this day. It's an amazing sense of people. I really got the feeling, and I still remember it just flashed in my mind to the very last day when we're all sitting there in the parking lot knowing that we're all about to split off and go our separate ways. It was just a really raw feeling of, we did it, we've made it through all this together, and we're all adults now. It was such a passionate, raw feeling with all these folks, and I still cherish that to this day, and I wish I would have had the opportunity to do even 4 years of IB at this point because of how solid that was. So I think it's very helpful in the high school side of things to really build that sense of community, to get you out of your comfort zone, to struggle a little bit in what do I actually know, as everybody knows here with the IB program, and how you know it's actually a tree. We always call back to that one as a fun inside joke. And it just speaks to really challenging what you think you know as a person. Now in college, that's where I think this became the most useful, because college wasn't necessarily, hey, here's a list of vocabulary terms, can you say them again to me 2 months from now? It's, how can you actually support that you believe this? And I think that was one thing that stumped a lot of my friends, and I sat there going, I spent way too much time doing this. I've got this in the bag, and finished college in not 4 years, but 3 years because of the IB credits. I think they were a very good help to dump it into the economics major and say, okay, what do I really want to do with this now? So of course, the priority picks for classes were very helpful. Loved all of that stuff. And just the general year off of college really helped me kind of take some of that stress off. I got out of there, I was doing even some work on the side. If you can't tell by my super energetic personality, I was working at Legoland as a retail assistant, basically managing the cash register. So if you think I'm full of energy, try 20,000 families and kids running through there on a daily basis screaming at you. I thought it was super fun, but really helped me develop just a full suite of the talking skills, the being able to just be a general human being, I think was super cool. And now the last part is the workforce. As boring as it may sound, I think my job's awesome. I do one of the weirdest things is consulting in the email marketing space. So those spam emails that you get in your inbox, I'm not gonna say thank you, it's not me. I actually write really good ones. So if you're ever interested in any sort of copywriting, again, it's thanks to the IB program that I was able to learn to write in a concise way that actually means something and not just a bunch of junk mail. So that also helps too. But I've been able to communicate with C-suite, with venture capitalists as a 24-year-old to say, okay, I'm on the same playing field as you guys that have been doing this for 30 years. Why? Because I know how to talk to you and I know how to engage in a meaningful way, and I don't know how to just follow something that's given to me and put it onto the next task and the next task. It's how do we do something creatively and how do we challenge what already exists? So I think in all three of those aspects of my life, the IB program as a whole has been just one of the most important things to the core of not just getting through another day of school. I don't remember how I woke up that early back in the day. I think it was really impressive. But just how do I get on with life beyond that? And how do I set myself up for success just as a person? So I owe it all to everybody here at Great Oak that's gonna keep me coming back.
Thank you, Brett. Can you guys come up, my current and alumni? Just kind of line up against the stage. How many of you have heard the myth that you can't do sports or you can't be too involved? IB program takes up too much time and you're studying too much. Yeah, I know you don't want to raise your hand, but you have. We have a small sampling. Come on, just because you're graduated doesn't mean you don't join the group. How many of you are involved in a sport on campus? How many of you are involved in one club? 2 clubs? 3 clubs? 4 clubs? 10 clubs? I always joke around, and it's one of the things that I will say as a person who is coming out of the classroom over the past few years, and I would have them coming in and telling me, like, I'm stressed, and I'm so worried, and I don't have any time, and then the next day they come in and go, will you sponsor this club? We found this foundation, and we really want to do this cool thing for it. I go, I thought you were just telling me about how busy you were and how you don't have a life. So one of the kind of myth busters to kind of put things in perspective is, what kind of a life do you want your teenager to have? Do you want them to have a life where they're going out after and they're studying with other students and they're meeting at a coffee shop and they're doing community service on the weekends together, and for their activity that is asking them to be physically active, they're going on a hike on the weekend? Or do you want them to have time to sit on the couch and stare at their phone for 3 more hours? There's a balance of what kind of life do we want them to be able to have. I'm going to take questions and let them answer because they are experiencing this, not me. So if there's things that have come up and you would be willing to ask the question, please do so, and I'll have them kind of share a little bit about what they're involved in. I'm sure it will stem from the questions you have. And sorry, I don't have a mic. Thank you.
What does a typical day look like when you're enrolling in the IB program?
Go ahead. Thank you, Sam.
So in the morning I wake up around like 6 o'clock because I also have my brother who's a freshman here, and then I get to school at around 8. Me and my friends hang out in the library until like 8:22, and then we just like classes roll on. We have like a little bit of fun in each class, and then talk in between like passing periods, and then lunch hits, and then we're all like tired, ready to go home, but then like we're like we just want to finish school and then get back
last June. They're all headed to room together at UCLA, which I would like to be a fly on the wall sometimes of those study sessions. It's going to be a good time. Do you want to speak a little bit to what your days look like when you, like, kind of the difference between junior year and senior year, maybe?
Okay, so basically, coming out of the IB program, junior year for us, I think our experience definitely aligns with that of Bryce's, in that there's such a strong sense of community and day to day. The quote from the student who was at Stanford, I forgot her name, Taylor. She spoke of the fact that you have all these students who you see on a day-to-day basis. You have this great sense of community, and in that manner, you have such a more fulfilling time studying and.
Yeah, so, and to answer your question of like how a typical day in the life would go, I'd say like, at least in my personal experience, it wasn't very, well, I definitely enjoyed the process of IB. However, the days sometimes got a little bit like, yeah, stressful, but obviously it was pretty rewarding. So we'd go to school, I had a 0 period senior year, so we'd go in at 7:30, end at 3:30, you do your typical clubs, do all that at school. Then you have, like, usually most IB students play a sport or have a club, they're home by 5:30 p.m. or like 6, around then. And then after that, it's usually studying until you fall asleep. And can you guys agree?
I think,
Yeah.
I think something worth noting too is, as a part of the, like all the teachers in the IB program, like we had like the best teachers. Like I think the best teachers in Grade Oak are the IB teachers, and AP. So getting into these upper level division classes is definitely going to be able to expose you to a different level of learning. And something about the teachers too is that they help you, or they're very flexible in the fact that they help coordinate the tests equally, or like throughout the days. So like, for example, our HL math teacher, Mr. Maxey, would basically help us, like if we had an English test on one day, he'd be like, okay, we can make the test on Thursday or Friday instead, so you guys can have more time to study for your English test. So it's, because of these small, like, class, like, numbers of students in these classes, it's much more flexible in that sense. So that's definitely an advantage.
Thank you. Other questions that are out there? Thank you.
What are the class sizes compared to the other classes?
Our HL math class last year had, what was it, 16 students. But
This year it has 35. It varies from year to year. And I would say it varies from class to class. It varies with funding, all of those things. So on average, at Great Oak, every single class is funded at 36 to 1, 37 to 1. I would like English class. I would say is pretty much straight the same across the board. Is 35, 33, 32-ish, around there. So you're not necessarily going to be guaranteed like a lower class size than you would in another class, but it tends to happen in our IB classes sometimes if there's only one section, or depending on how many students are interested or at that level that year. Right now we're kind of in a growth phase. We're coming out of COVID. So this last year, in the last graduating class, we had 36 full diploma kids. The seniors that you see in front of you, we have 43. Our incoming junior class, we have almost 80. So that's more traditional of what our numbers would look like pre-COVID. Right now, those numbers are a little bit lower.
I was just gonna, one thing you do tend to see with IB classes is you see a lot of the same faces in all those different classes. So it's kind of a nice sense of community that you have throughout the day.
I will say about the smaller class size that you were talking about, for me personally, a lot of the classes that I'm taking this year are pretty small. And I do think it's been really helpful because, number one, again, like we've all kind of been saying, you get really connected to the people that you're in classes with. Because, it's a small group of people, you all have a common experience and they really care. I would say that with IB teachers, they care, on a different level than I've really ever experienced in any other class, where they really are looking out for how you're learning, how you're growing in a way that's very unique. So I think that connection that you get really not only, it just helps to allow you to build those skills and to learn on a more in-depth level than I think I've ever experienced in any other class.
With the AP classes having like a one-on-one on Saturdays, study workshop, does the same thing happen with IB or is it only some?
Yeah, so a lot of times our IB teachers will also have those Saturdays. Our history teachers last year had one. One of the assessments that's in every IB course is called an internal assessment. The internal assessment is one that is written and taken inside of the classroom, again, over multiple days. Sometimes, usually 4 to 6 weeks, I would say, is the average timetable for an internal assessment. Sometimes they'll run workshops on Saturdays to help students just work on it for a concentrated amount of time. We all know that when we sit down, if we have a larger task, if we have a couple of hours rather than just the 52-minute class period that we have, even if you have 4 hours is way different than 5 days in 52 minutes. One, because they're not distracted by whatever class is before or after, things like that. So sometimes it'll be for the internal assessment for a Saturday session. Sometimes it'll just be for a mock exam to help them prepare and practice. Because again, there's not many opportunities that we're given where we have a 2-hour time frame where we can say, let's take a real paper one and have you practice what it's like. Because I think what I know from teaching that class for so long is after they have one time when they got the full 2 hours, they go, oh my gosh, I don't need extra time. I'm gonna be totally fine. We alleviated and assuaged their fears about taking something that was really difficult, and they ultimately walked into the real test that much more confident, which is the end game. How many of you have had a Saturday for an IB class?
What is that special aspect or the differentiating aspect of IB program, which creates the more that sense of community that I've been hearing compared to an AP or a regular program? What is that differentiating aspect in IB?
Allie, I'll go to you because you haven't shared, and then we'll go Reese and Sam.
I think it's just the fact that it's like a big overarching program with everything like connected, where AP is like a bunch of smaller different classes that you could take that don't really relate to each other. With IB, like a lot of the people take the same classes because of the similar program, and then they're all connected in some way, so you see a lot of the same people in the same classes, and then you eventually like establish connections.
I think in a similar way to what Ali said, the program is trying to teach you to grow as a whole person, not really where AP is really focused on building one specific skill. And kind of like how Bryce was touching on earlier, where you're just learning and regurgitating, whereas IB is really about trying to get you to grow and learn new things, where a lot of your classes are going to be interconnected and are going to teach you to learn on a more global scale. And then also with IB, we have different things that we do, such as TOK and CAS. TOK is another class that all DIP students take after school, which is exclusively for IB students. So that kind of allows you to feel like it's a bit more different than AP, where you have like an extra set of skills that you're learning and things that you're being exposed to. And then also CAS is really a program where you're demonstrating your involvement in your community and the ways in which you're able to impact the people around you. So in general, IB is really looking at you as an entire human being, whereas AP kind of looks at you in the context of how well you can do in an exam or in a class and things like that. So if that better answers your question.
Sam, something different?
I'm just like gonna compare AP Saturday sessions and our TOK sessions. We have like two hours per week. And during like this AP mock trial, like mock exam, like those Saturday sessions, you're not sure that you will see the same people over and over and over again. You might see like new faces from like different classes. But for our TOK, it's just same standard people coming every week for 2 hours, conversing with you and like talking to you, not just about like TOK stuff, but also like their personal experiences, like just chit chatting, which like strengthens our bond as like a community, and it's like this friendship bond in a way.
We have 2 different days, we call release days. So the juniors, we release them around November. And so their first release day last year was in November, and it was the first time, and they came to learn about the core, about TOK and the EE and CAS, and we had them out of class for the day, and we all met in the library. And it was one of my favorite days because they walked in and they're like, "You're doing Flyme? You're doing Flyme?" They didn't really know who each other was yet, because they're just in classes with a whole bunch of other kids who aren't necessarily full diploma. But that's the day that I think that bond really starts to form, because it's the group chat. After that day, the group chat exists, where they're communicating and talking and supporting each other a lot. The seniors, we have a release day. They're going to be released from class in about a month to work on their extended essay. If they're done with their extended essay, they'll be able to work on their college apps. So we try to give them opportunities too to kind of be together. And I would say they support each other on another level. When they begin a club, if they need people to come to their club, they go here first. And they relentlessly support each other and show up for each other so that that club can be successful. What I think the result is, not only are they more compassionate and more involved on campus, but they obviously have really invested in important activities that are having their college apps help them look more appealing, because they're in legitimate and bona fide experiences that they can substantiate with evidence and things like that. Any other questions? Yeah.
So if I ask somebody a question, someone who has taken just the AP courses and not IB, since they're not being represented here today in numbers, what would they say that the IB students have missed? I see this side, I understand the community and all that, so.
I've talked to a lot of AP kids who decided against the IB program because I'm not gonna lie to you, it is hard. Sam said it's never stressful. I can't fully agree with that.
It's not stressful for me yet.
Well, yeah, I think the majority of us would agree that a lot of the time there's a lot of work and it's stressful. There can be an AP as well, but it's not quite as much. And you'll hear some stories from some of us like, "Oh, I went to bed at this time last night. I have so much work." But a lot of the time there's some procrastination that's going on there, so it's really not so bad. But when I hear the AP kids talk, they have more spare time sometimes, depending on how many classes they're taking. But they're also kind of always trying to convince themselves that IB wasn't worth it. That their decision not to take the program was the right one. And I think at the end of the day, when we think about what we've learned from the program and what we've taken away, we will think it's going to be worth it, however hard it's been.
So the students, one follow-up, if you don't mind. The students who are taking AP courses and want to go into IB program, they only have sophomore to take AP courses?
No, I would say, and you guys could, how many of you took at least 2 or 3 AP classes junior year?
Junior, okay.
Yeah, so a lot of our AP classes work in conjunction with our IB classes. So it's not that you have to pick one path or the other. There are some instances where you do. You need to decide if you want to take History of the Americas, which is a 2-year course, or whether or not you want to take APUSH and AP Gov. Like, that's a choice that you have to make. If you're doing, and even if you're doing full diploma, you can still make that choice. English, you can make the choice of which kind of assessment style you like better, depending on what you want to do if you don't want to be full diploma. But there are other times like psychology and physics where the first year of AP is actually the first year of IB. So our AP psychology class, then if you want to keep going because you love psychology, then you take HL psychology the second year. So we really have tried to put ourselves in a position where our IB classes work with our AP classes, and our AP classes help prepare for the thinking that's required in the IB classes. So a lot of our sophomores take AP biology. They're then prepared to be able to take either SL or HL biology later on, junior and senior year. So they really work together in that way. I really don't, it's not a competition of which one is necessarily better. It's which one is better for your student. Which style do they like better and what types of things? There are some kids who would prefer to work more autonomously and on their own, and then go take a test and knock it out.
And there are other people who really like the process of learning, which is much more IB. A lot of the things that you do in IB is recording your reflections of what did you think in the beginning, what do you now think in the middle, and what do you now think now that it's over. They want to see that process from beginning to end, not just the finished product.
I think something to add on to that as well is with IB, I think it's kind of being framed as like so much stuff. Like everybody's in 10 clubs, everyone's doing so much after school. They're just, I think that's the conception is that some of these kids like have no life essentially. But I think with IB and with the requirements of CAS and all those additional requirements, a lot of the stuff that you're already doing can be applied to that, and a lot of the stuff that you're already doing on campus with clubs can go into CAS, and a lot of those clubs can also overlap into other clubs. So you're really just taking advantage of all your time that you're putting into one thing and applying it to others. I think that's certainly.
It's all about the double dip.
Yeah.
So I think my question is more on like the testing style. So I've heard the difference in at the end, the test. And the only thing I noticed was that one is a presentation that they have to record. So would you say that your exams throughout the year is based on presentations that you do? Do you have to explain it? Or do you have to write essays? Is that kind of like what your testing is throughout the year?
Jasmine?
So if we're talking specifically about English, because that is where the presentation is in IB, what you do throughout the year is you will write essays, you will write papers. However, in writing, you are preparing to speak your points. So we have things called the individual oral, and throughout the year, we'll do maybe like 2-minute, 5-minute presentations, and in the finale of the course, you'll do a 10-minute presentation. So there is writing and speaking throughout, and at the end of junior year, the assessment itself is speaking. However, yeah, to answer your question, you do writing and speaking throughout, and they really hold your hand through it. They teach you how to format your papers, how to manage your time when speaking, what points do you want to hit, how to carry yourself throughout the speech. And it really does prepare you for the final I.O., where you're in front of your teacher in a room, they're recording you, and you just speak about things you've learned throughout the year. And I think they do a good job preparing you for that. But that is the first year of English.
Thomas?
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I think one thing I found quite different about like the IB style testing is something called the individual assessment, the IA. So whereas in something like AP World, they kind of give you a question and you're like trying to remember all these like events and write on it. Whereas with this, it was kind of like choose a history topic that interests you. So I went like, oh, my great uncle was in the Falklands War, so I want to look into that and learn more about that. And so it's kind of, I was enjoying myself during these assessments
To answer you directly, like, do they all have presentations? English is the only one that has an individual presentation. Spanish has an oral exam that they have to speak one-on-one, but they're given a couple of pictures, and then they pick one picture the day they come in, and then they have to speak about that picture. So there's a combination. I think what I like about it is it addresses the different modalities for them, that there's some writing, some speaking, sometimes under time constraints, sometimes over a longer period of time. I'm gonna pause questions because I know some people have things to do, and we said we were gonna be done around 7. The last portion of our evening